What if the smallest habit you ignore today is the one that quietly tells the truth about your body tomorrow? I am 106 years old, and I am not here to sell you discipline, denial, or fear. I am here to tell you what I learned the slow way, by living long enough to see patterns repeat themselves in my own body. I did not count calories. I did not chase numbers. I did not punish myself for change. What I did consistently and calmly was pay attention. When you live this long, you begin to understand something most people miss. Your body is always speaking, but it whispers before it shouts. Weight is one of those whispers, not as a judgment, not as a verdict, but as information. I'm not talking about standing on a scale every morning with anxiety in your chest. I'm talking about noticing trends the way a farmer notices seasons: a little up, a little down, a pause, a shift. Over time, those small movements tell a story, often long before illness, fatigue, or weakness ever arrive. Many men I knew waited until their clothes no longer fit, their knees protested, or their doctor's voice changed tone. By then, the body had already been asking for attention for years. I learned that paying attention early did not mean controlling everything. It meant respecting signals before they turned into problems. This habit required no special strength. It required honesty without drama, awareness without obsession. I simply checked in with myself regularly and asked, is something changing? Most of the time, the answer was no. Sometimes it was yes, and that yes was useful, not frightening. I share this because at 106, I have learned that longevity is not built on extreme actions. It is built on quiet, repeated awareness, and weight, when observed calmly and regularly, is one of the simplest mirrors we are given. I learned early, though not early enough, that paying attention is not the same as trying to control. Most men confuse the two. They hear, watch your weight, and immediately imagine restriction, discipline, denial, or punishment. That misunderstanding is why so many abandon the habit before it ever helps them. What I practiced was observation, not correction. When I was younger, I watched friends swing violently between neglect and obsession. For years, they ignored their bodies entirely. Then one day, a mirror, a photograph, or a doctor startled them awake, and suddenly everything became extreme. Harsh diets, sudden rules, fear-driven effort, and just as suddenly as it began, it ended. The body resists panic. It always has. What I discovered instead was this: the body responds best to calm attention. When you notice weight changes without judgment, you gain something far more valuable than control. You gain timing. Timing matters more than intensity. A small upward drift noticed early gives you options. A slow decline caught in time invites curiosity. Is appetite changing? Is sleep shorter? Is movement different? None of these questions require force. They require honesty. At 106, I can tell you plainly that most damage is not caused by sudden excess. It is caused by slow neglect. Weight does not leap overnight. It inches. And those inches, when ignored for years, become burdens people later describe as unexpected. There was a period in my life, middle age, busy years, when I noticed my weight creeping upward, not dramatically, just enough that if I ignored it, nothing would have happened for a long time. But I paid attention. I didn't panic. I didn't react. I simply became aware. That awareness subtly changed my behavior without effort. Portions adjusted themselves. Movement returned naturally. The body often corrects when it feels seen. This is what many people miss. Attention alters outcomes even when action stays minimal. Paying attention regularly also taught me humility. There were times my weight changed despite doing nothing different. Aging does that. Hormones shift, muscle redistributes. The point was never to freeze myself at a number from the past. The point was to understand what was happening now. Men especially struggle with this. We like clear rules, win or lose, up or down. But the body does not operate on pride, it operates on balance. Watching weight regularly keeps you in conversation with that balance instead of arguing with it later. I never weighed myself to prove discipline. I weighed myself to stay oriented, like checking a compass. You don't yell at a compass when it points east. You simply adjust your direction if needed, or you don't, if east is where you intend to go. Another truth I learned: ignoring weight changes often masks other shifts. Reduced strength, less resilience, longer recovery. Weight is rarely the problem itself. It is a signal traveling alongside others. When noticed early, it invites broader awareness. When ignored, it becomes a scapegoat blamed later for everything else. I also learned restraint in frequency. Regularly does not mean constantly. Daily checking can turn information into noise. I checked often enough to see trends, not fluctuations. Weekly, sometimes less. The body fluctuates naturally. Respecting that prevents obsession. Over decades, this habit became quiet and neutral. No emotion attached, no self-worth assigned, just data. And because it stayed neutral, it stayed sustainable. That is why I am still here telling you this. The men who lasted longest in my life were not the strictest. They were the most observant. They noticed small changes and adjusted gently, or they noticed and chose not to adjust and accepted the consequences without surprise. That is the real gift of paying attention to your weight regularly. Not prevention, not perfection, but clarity. You stop being confused by your own body. You stop being shocked by outcomes that were visible years earlier. At 106, I can say this with certainty: your body keeps records whether you look at them or not. Paying attention does not create problems. It reveals them while they are still quiet. And quiet problems are the only kind you can live with for a very long time. By the time you reach my age, you stop asking whether change will come. You already know it will. The only remaining question is whether you will notice it while it is still gentle or meet it later when it has become loud and demanding. Watching my weight over a lifetime taught me that most changes announce themselves quietly first. They ask for acknowledgement, not resistance. There were decades when nothing seemed to happen, years where my weight barely moved, my strength felt familiar, and my routines carried me forward without thought. Those years lulled many men into believing that stability was permanent. Then came a decade when small shifts appeared, nothing dramatic, nothing urgent, just a pound here, a softness there, a slower return to baseline. I did not react, I observed. That observation spared me confusion later. One mistake I saw repeatedly was men tying meaning to single moments. A sudden increase became a moral failure. A sudden decrease became a victory. Both interpretations were wrong. Weight, viewed honestly, is not a verdict. It is a trend. Trends only appear when you look regularly and without emotion. That is why this habit must be boring to work. Excitement ruins accuracy. As I aged, I noticed something else. The relationship between weight and energy changed. In youth, weight followed appetite and activity closely. In older age, it followed recovery, sleep, and stress more than food. Men who only watched what they ate missed this entirely. Men who watched patterns understood it. Paying attention to weight taught me that the body reorganizes priorities with time. Fighting that reorganization is exhausting. Noticing it is liberating. There were periods when my weight dropped slightly, even when my eating had not changed. Younger men might celebrate this. I did not. I paid attention. Weight loss without intention can be a signal just as weight gain can be. Sometimes it reflected reduced muscle. Sometimes it reflected illness. Sometimes it reflected nothing at all. The key was not panic, but context. Watching regularly gave me context. I learned to pair weight awareness with simple questions. Am I sleeping differently? Am I moving less without realizing it? Am I recovering slower from effort? These questions did not demand immediate answers. They sharpened perception. Over time, perception guided behavior more effectively than rules ever could. Another lesson came from comparison. Men often compare themselves to their past selves or to others. I learned not to. My weight at 40 meant nothing at 80. My body composition at 60 was irrelevant at 100. Paying attention regularly freed me from nostalgia. I dealt with the body I had, not the one I remembered. What surprised me most was how little effort this habit required. Once it became routine, it took almost nothing from me. A moment of checking, a moment of noting. Then life continued. Because the habit was light, it survived decades. Heavy habits collapse under their own weight. I also learned that paying attention to weight cultivated honesty in other areas. When you stop lying to yourself about numbers, you stop lying about effort, rest, and limits. Many men resist this because honesty removes excuses, but it also removes anxiety. You no longer wonder what is happening. As I passed 90, the meaning of weight shifted again. It became less about balance and more about resilience, maintaining enough mass to recover from illness, enough strength to stand, enough reserve to heal. Men who feared weight their entire lives struggled here. Men who watched without fear adapted smoothly. This is something few talk about. In extreme old age, the danger is not always excess. Sometimes it is fragility. Paying attention regularly prepares you for both directions. It teaches you when to support the body rather than restrain it. By now, you may notice what I am not saying. I'm not telling you what to eat. I am not prescribing exercise. I am not promising outcomes. That is deliberate. At 106, I have learned that instructions age poorly. Awareness ages well. Watching my weight did not make me immortal. It did not protect me from loss, injury, or decline. What it gave me was coherence. My body never surprised me. When change came, I recognized it as an old acquaintance, not an enemy. That is the secret I offer you. Not control, not optimization, not youth. Just the quiet power of noticing before you are forced to react. What remains, after a century of living, is not a list of rules, but a way of relating to yourself. If there is one habit I would carry with me again, it is this simple one: paying attention without fear. Watching your weight regularly is not about chasing youth or resisting age. It is about staying in conversation with your body instead of meeting it only when something goes wrong. Over time, that conversation becomes familiar. You recognize its tone. You sense when something is changing. And because you notice early, you are rarely surprised. I did not live to 106 by mastering my body. I lived by listening to it. Weight was one of the clearest signals it offered: honest, quiet, and consistent. I never demanded that it behave. I only asked it to inform me. That relationship carried me through decades of change without panic or confusion. This habit requires no perfection. You will miss weeks. You will forget months. Nothing breaks. You simply return to paying attention. That gentleness is what allows the habit to survive a lifetime. Many men wait for certainty before they act. They wait for a diagnosis, a warning, a crisis. By then, the body has already spent years asking politely. Paying attention regularly means you hear the polite requests instead of the alarms. I cannot promise you outcomes. I cannot guarantee health, longevity, or control. What I can say truthfully after a long life is that awareness gives you dignity. You move through change informed rather than reactive. You age with coherence instead of confusion. If you take nothing else from my words, take this. Your body is not an enemy to be conquered. It is a record keeper. Look at the record from time to time. That is all I ever did, and it was enough.